You're listening to Scars Survivor Hour on Power 95, bringing awareness, hope, and healing for survivors of child sexual abuse.
Welcome, everyone, to our Scars Survivor Hour radio show. I am Debbie Ray Rivers. I'm the Executive Director of SCARS, Saving Children and Revealing Secrets, a charity whose mission is to reduce the risk of child sexual abuse in our Bermuda community. I am also a survivor of childhood sexual abuse and a mother of 2 survivors. You know, Survivor Hour is another platform to spread awareness and to be an advocate and a voice for those who have been sexually molested as well as their affected families. When a child has been violated, deceived, and betrayed, their life will be changed forever. Sexual abuse has kept survivors silent for generations. Our hope is that this show is just going to be another platform to be a voice. We cannot be silent around this topic. We must continue to advocate for the protection of children in our community. We must always be the voice for children, for our survivors. This topic is silencing in so many ways. If a child is sexually violated, and it is either covered up, denied, minimized, rejected, the light inside a little child can be dimmed. If a childhood wound isn't cared for, or when the scab gets ripped off unexpectedly or even unintentionally, the light inside the survivor goes out. My scab was ripped off unexpectedly very recently, and I became very angry, and I cried many tears. I felt powerless over a situation where I wanted to use my voice. For survivors of sexual assault, our emotions can be our messengers. They can also dim the light that we hold inside us. It's important to recognize why we survivors of child sexual assault respond the way we do. Once we recognize it and understand where it comes from, we can ignite that light again. Joining me in the studio is our co-host, Dr. Alicia Hancock. Hi, Dr. Hancock.
Hey there.
You know, Dr. Hancock is a registered clinical psychologist with almost 2 decades of clinical experience in the mental health field. Dr. Hancock is also a valued SCARS volunteer board member. Listeners, you are welcome to call in with any question. The number to call is 292-9595. If you have a question and you don't feel comfortable being heard on air, we understand that. Please email me at Debbie, DEBI, @scars.bm. I will read the question and we will make every attempt to answer it. If we can't answer it on air, we will respond to you directly via email. Now, there are some broadcasting rules that I would like to share as we do every month. This show contains sensitive information. It's intended for adults only. This is a sensitive topic, so when calling into the show, we ask callers do not mention your name or a perpetrator's name. Remember, we have no way of confirming your testimony. You can share, but no names mentioned, please. This show is also not meant for personal attack. It's meant to educate and empower and advocate for our children. We are not experts in the law. We can answer questions about surviving childhood trauma, childhood sexual abuse, the trauma from that. And Dr. Hancock in the studio is here for that. And she is an expert in the mind. Please, absolutely no attack on any lawyer, judge, or magistrate. We are advocates, and we just really are grateful for you respecting, these broadcasting rules. If you are a survivor and you wish to be a guest on the show, please call me. Call the SCARS line. I'm the one that answers it. It's 297-2277. Or you are welcome to email me at Debbie, DEBI, @scars.bm. And if you're a survivor and you don't wish to be on this show or wish to call in, we completely understand, believe me. But all guest survivors will be pre-interviewed. And if a guest survivor does come on the show and the perpetrator that sexually harmed them as a child was convicted, it will be their choice to provide those details. But you know, Dr. Hancock, I found this quote online, and as I was thinking about this show today. And it's a quote by Alice Little. And it says, "As traumatized children, we always dreamed that someone would come and save us. We never dreamed that it would, in fact, be ourselves as adults." As I said earlier, childhood pain can cause our internal light to dim. Isn't that so true?
Absolutely. Absolutely.
I mean, I'm sure you've seen many dim lights coming from children, across your desk, or from adult victims of childhood sexual abuse. I know I have. We've learned that child sexual abuse causes deep wounds and trauma that could dim the light in some survivors. It can cause survivors, or children who are violated, who were once happy and joyful, to become sad and maybe lonely or angry, unsafe, lost and fearful, right? So that little light inside them can become dim. And this is the reason that we must do everything in our power to prevent the sexual harm of children. We must not allow that light inside our children to dim. And the thing about the topic that, we're talking about, sexual abuse and sexual violation of children, is preventable. And during today's show, we're going to discuss how a child with low self-esteem, can become a vulnerable target for predators. How a child not educated or informed on the topic of body safety and boundaries and consent may cause them to be a vulnerable target to predators of sexual harm. How a child whose parents are either not actively involved or preoccupied in their life for whatever reason, that could be their own trauma, something's going on in that adult's life, that child can, unknowingly to the family, can be an easy target to predators of sexual harm. We know that this might give them, predators, full access to gain the trust and deceive and manipulate the family in that child's life. We know that 90% of people who use children for sexual gain know, they're 90% known, right? Only 10%, according to research, are strangers. And I can tell you, of the thousands of survivors I have spoken with in this community, most of them, a huge majority of them, knew the perpetrator. Right?
Yep. I mean, to summarize, kids that experience either emotional or physical neglect are always at risk. The perpetrator looks for the opportunity to target these kinds of children, but don't be surprised, or don't think for a minute that even if a child is not emotionally or physically neglected, that they are not at risk. Every child is at risk as long as perpetrators are free to roam the streets and have not been given any consequences for previous
100%.
offenses.
Yeah, you're absolutely correct. I mean, I think we should start with low self-esteem. What do you think? Let's start with a child with low self-esteem. And I'm going to give you a visual, everyone, of an example of a child who did receive love and emotional support, but a child who suffered with low self-esteem. Imagine a little girl with freckles all over her face, red hair, short red hair, little skinny legs, feeling ugly, being told she was ugly, cold names like Speckled Hind. Did you get your sunburn through a screen door? Freckle face, ugly face. A little girl who doesn't remember being chosen for dances or rarely picked on a team. Let's face it, good looks help greatly to being what we deem as popular, right, with other kids, the outside of a child. But hurtful comments for how you look on the outside can set up a child to be a target for perpetrators of child sexual abuse, those children with low self-esteem.
Yep, children that are desperate to have somebody tell them that they're good enough, pretty enough, just enough. And so, they become quite vulnerable, and easily targeted because they're so desperate.
Yeah. I mean, I was vulnerable when a 25 or 26-year-old who obviously has one intention, to use innocence for sexual gain, begins showing a young child who they can see struggles with low self-esteem. A young child with an immature mind starts showing them attention. Attention like, you're so pretty. Look at you. You're gorgeous. And a child who's not feeling that, it could leave a child in a very vulnerable position. Especially a child who hasn't been equipped with information like body safety and boundaries, right?
Yeah, I mean, just those comments alone can make a child feel safe enough to jump into that, to receiving that from somebody else who's willing to give it to them.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, children are vulnerable. Maybe, when I think about it, when I look back on my own life, never really, because we didn't have prevention education years ago, we were not talking about sexual abuse. But, we never were saying something like, even if your babysitter makes you feel uncomfortable, you can come and tell me. Your babysitter should never make you feel uncomfortable and touch you in areas of your body.
Correct. And unfortunately, in those positions, if the parent seemingly trusts the adults that the child is exposed to, then the child immediately trusts that person.
Yeah, absolutely. You think about a family friend or somebody that's harming a child. If that child isn't equipped with the information to know that anybody, who makes you feel uncomfortable, it's not okay, and you can come and tell us. Don't feel afraid, no matter what someone says, no matter what someone does. It will never be your fault. You can tell us anything about anyone that makes you feel uncomfortable, even the people I like,
even the people that I trust,
as parents and guardians. Even the people I trust have no right,
correct,
to touch your privates, to ask you to touch their privates, to expose their privates to you, to show you anything. Years ago, we didn't have devices, so there was no, it would be a magazine probably, to do whatever they need to do to turn that child on and themselves on in a sick way. But the lesson is we've got to build our children's self-esteem.
Correct. And, I think, unfortunately, the minute that a child becomes uncomfortable, regardless of who it is, they become scared. So then that just can prevent them, if they don't have the education or they haven't been taught what to look for and what the boundary should be, they become silenced immediately. Yeah.
And they grow up learning, we can trust anyone. Well, no, just because you're related or just because they're a friend of the family or just because, they're the favorite person in that child's life or the parent's life or the adult's life does not necessarily make a child feel safe, or it doesn't necessarily make a child safe. To build your self-esteem, a child's self-esteem, this is a message to all the parents and guardians out there and grandparents and people with small children. Intervene if you hear doesn't matter, a sibling, a relative, a friend, tease a child about their looks, their weight. I've heard, the shade of their skin or anything else that will make them feel not important, not worthy, right? Intervene. Stop that. Because we don't know what that's doing to that little child who might be already not feeling important and valuable. Let your child know that their real identity is on the inside. It's not on the outside. Help your children see what kindness looks like. Let them know that they matter. Just because they don't feel pretty, that doesn't make them ugly, right? Just because they don't feel smart, it doesn't mean that they're dumb. We really have to build our children's self-esteem.
Yeah. I mean, we have to figure out where, why they're not feeling good about themselves first, and figure out where that's coming from. And typically, the first form of being able to restore that is through, the people that they care about the most and care about the opinion the most, which is their parents, family members.
Even friends. You know, if they're hearing this bullying or this being teased about something, that could affect a little child. And then that child could become prey to a predator. Because that predator is going to know what I need to do to make that child feel special.
Yeah, they're an easy target.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, unfortunately, when they're teased or bullied for whatever reason, anything that feeds the narrative that they're not good enough, you know, they're going to start to believe, and they become hypersensitive to people's comments. So with the insecurity and the lack of safety, anybody that seemingly is interested in their life, they're going to attach to very quickly. These are kids that will attach very quickly, and unfortunately can be a target for abuse.
Yeah. We know that predators prey on those who have low self-esteem, those children that don't feel good enough, don't feel special enough. They take advantage of a child, and they will take advantage of a child who doesn't feel special, who doesn't feel valuable, who doesn't feel important, who doesn't feel beautiful. You know, they tell the child everything they want to hear and more.
Yep.
And they fill that child with words because a child doesn't understand manipulation.
No. They, you know, most of the time they take an adult's words as gospel. And so if an adult seemingly says that they're not good enough, or they don't hear it enough that they are good enough, then
Yes.
you know, they're more likely to latch on to people that will feed their ego.
Yes. Even grown-ups don't even know when we're being deceived and manipulated.
For
We
sure.
as grown-ups can't even pick up on it. Anybody can say anything, but actions speak louder, right? And so they start to reel in this child by beginning, because they're not going to abuse the child. Most time, not going to abuse the child first time they're around them. No, they got to build that child's trust. They got to get that child to really like them, love them,
attach to them.
attach to them, because the child really believes that this person sincerely cares about them. When all along that perpetrator wants one thing.
Well, and think about when, you know, if a child doesn't have a blueprint of what it feels, what it's like to be cared about, loved, unconditionally loved, then they don't have anything to compare it to.
Right. Yeah, and I actually said perpetrators want one thing. Well, actually they don't. I don't know how you feel about this, but I think they want three things. They want their ego to be fed because they themselves have low self-esteem. They could want their own sexual desire to be filled and their warped, distorted
Absolutely.
desire, because this is a child, or their own powerlessness to feel powerful.
Absolutely. Yeah. The power and control is a huge thing, and many times other things become secondary to that. Especially if they have a lack of self-efficacy in their own life.
Right.
But some, you know, but some unfortunately have a sociopathic mindset, which, you know, allows them to believe that they deserve to have whatever they want.
Yeah. No matter how they have to get it. Mm-hmm. And the damage that's going to be, trail of damage that's going to be caused as a result.
Absolutely.
You know, everyone, build your children's self-esteem as much as possible.
Yeah, just taking interest in your child's life. You know, one of the beauties of raising children is balancing a nurturing environment with boundaries.
Yeah. Yeah. You know, even if you see in your house, you know, siblings, I've heard of sibling on sibling.
Yes.
You know, and I spoke with a survivor years ago, and cried with her. And it was an older sibling, and she said he was a bully. We have to really intervene when we see bullying behavior. I know I say it all the time, and I sound like a broken record. I'm sorry, listening audience, but we've got to pay attention to bullies. Those who make other people feel uncomfortable, right? Mm-hmm. Because, absolutely. And if we see that in the home, we must intervene. We must listen. If you see your younger, one of your children feeling uncomfortable around a sibling and scared and fearful.
Yeah. Or feeling indebted to or forced to do what their older sibling wants them to do. And whilst nothing may happen in that household in terms of any sexual abuse, it opens up the idea that they will transfer those skills of people pleasing outside of there.
Yes. So true. So true. So we want to build our children's self-esteem. The next thing we need to do is to speak to our own children about body safety. Mm-hmm. We want to start early and we want to speak often. I'm encouraging anyone out there who has never done the Darkness to Light Stewards of Children training that SCARS provides to this community. I encourage you to get SCARS certified. If you're a babysitter or even a grandparent or an aunt that takes care of children, a teacher, a coach, we know that most of our teachers have done it. We're a huge shout out to our schools, mm-hmm. public and private, and our sporting organizations and our camps and our clubs. It's critical that you hear this information. We want to give our children the power to say no. I didn't do that. We want our children to know, I can say as a child, I don't want that hug from you. Whether you're my granny, my auntie, my uncle, my cousin, my parents' best friend.
Yeah, it should never be forced. And if a child, particularly with family, is resistant to hug or show affection, that's a red flag.
Yeah.
And not to say that you should force a child to do it, but it's a red flag to start talking to them because maybe something is wrong. Maybe something has happened.
Yeah. And also I want to say, if a child says, no, I don't want to give that person a hug, mm-hmm. we could be okay with that. Mm-hmm. It's okay. Let your child know they have the power to say no. No, mommy, I want to put on my own shoes.
Yes.
No, mommy, I don't need your help getting dressed. If they're old enough to do that, of course, right? I mean, we want to keep them safe. We don't want to be crazy about this, but we want them to have the ability to use their voice and say no. One thing, remember, everybody, predators don't want to get caught. They're going to spend some time, right, grooming that child to see, now, is this a child that I can trust that won't speak up?
Yeah, and as an adult, if you have a strong reaction to a child saying no to you in terms of their boundaries and their personal space, then, you need to look within yourself and ask, why are you offended? What is it about yourself that this is hitting a sore spot for you? That's not the child. It's not the child's fault.
Right. Right.
And you don't want to just turn it into the child has done something wrong by rejecting you, because you may have your own sensitivity of feeling rejected, and that's not on the child, that's on you.
Yeah. Pay attention to those behaviors. Our training really gets deep into recognizing signs, how to talk to your child, how to minimize the opportunity of this happening. And let's talk about a pleasing child.
Yeah. Yeah. A child that likes to please, and obviously some of that is, our personality variables, and other times it is a result of, maybe fear, things like that. And those children are definitely targets.
Yeah.
The fear of getting into trouble, the anxiety that they have of not pleasing an adult, supersedes the result, which is, pleasing them so that I'm a good girl. I'm only a good girl if I do what I'm told.
Yeah. I don't want to get daddy mad, especially if they see domestic violence in the house. Mm-hmm. I don't want to get anybody in my house mad. Mommy's already upset or daddy's already upset. Mm-hmm. I don't want to make them more upset. They're going to be afraid to speak up because they're protecting. Listen, children protect their parents. Mm-hmm. They do. They don't want their parents to be upset, to be mad, to be angry, and they're going to do many times. Now, some children will cause that if they're doing something, disrespectful. And children are children. But if they think, adult's going to go off their head or someone's going to get hit,
a strong reaction, you have to think about your voice for a child, is 10 times louder than what we hear it as adults.
Right. Say that again. That's really important because I didn't hear that years ago.
Yeah, the voice of an adult is, 10 times louder for a child than it is for an adult hearing it.
Yeah. And I was a yeller. I got to admit, I was a yeller. I thought that they would hear me more. They would get the message louder, clearer, but that wasn't the case. I also think sometimes you'll see a child who's a perfectionist want to be a pleasing child. Isn't that correct?
Oh, absolutely, absolutely. That, perfectionist children are very hypersensitive to making any mistakes. And so if there's a chance that saying something like, even if it's even revealing abuse, could result in a loud voice or mommy getting mad or daddy getting mad, then they're less likely to tell.
Yeah.
And these are definitely kids that, go out of their way to try to do everything right, even though they don't have the experience of being, of how to do everything correctly.
Yeah. Yeah. And how we respond to them is so important when they're acting out or when they're not doing what we want them to do. And, sometimes as the adults who are survivors of sexual abuse and childhood pain, that could be for an adult, the parent, guardian, a trigger that you're feeling out of, you don't have power because your child's not doing what you really want them to do.
Right. And I think we define respect a little bit too rigidly. If my child doesn't do what I tell them to do, they're disrespecting me and requires them to have a very intense reaction to scare them. So if you induce fear in your child, guess what? They're going to tell you less and less.
Yeah.
And, you don't want, essentially there typically is no need to raise your voice so loud that the child feels incredibly scared. Inducing fear in your child is not going to get them to do what you want typically.
Right.
It's not going to get them to open up to you. And the more that you apply corporal punishment, the less effective it's going to be.
Yeah.
You're going to raise an angry child who isn't going to talk to anybody about anything.
Right. Right. Because every time they did, they were, hit on the head or yelled at or even ridiculed.
Yeah. Yeah. You ruin, you start the ruining of your relationship with your child.
Yeah. And I think one of the challenges for parents, I think about myself, is we live in a small community. We know everybody. Sometimes we want to please other adults. Well, I want our child to be perfect, to make sure everybody's happy because we raise these wonderful, perfect kids.
Because it's a reflection on the parent. And
Right.
so the parents too sometimes have a perfectionist attitude about how they appear to other people. And so if a child's having a tantrum, then the fear is, well, that's a reflection on me not being a good enough parent.
Right.
And again, you're putting all of that baggage onto the child when it's actually your own baggage.
Yeah. And guess what happens? The perpetrator, who's known to the family, witnessing it.
Oh, absolutely. And seeing that this child is now afraid of you. So they're going to jump in to be this child's hero and be soft and kind and
Tell them what they want to hear.
accommodating, and be the safe space. So again, if your child is at risk or does not feel safe in their own home, then the threshold of what is safe for them, is quite low.
Right.
The expectation of what safety is quite low.
Right.
So they won't pick up on red flags.
No. Mm-mm. I mean, we've talked about building your child's self-esteem. We've talking about speak to your child about body safety. Let them know that they have choices, that their body belongs to them.
And often talking about boundaries, it's not something you say once, it's something you say often. Whenever they're going to a new place or they're going back to school, any transition is a good time to reinforce the talk about body safety. Test them, ask them, who's allowed to touch your body periodically.
Yes.
Don't just tell them, but ask them. One of the things that we do too much is we tell kids the answers instead of, seeing if they actually know the answers within them.
Right.
To know for sure that they get it.
Right. Right. If you're in a place and you're feeling uncomfortable, what is it that you can do that would make you feel safe? Yeah. Remember the code word we have in our family. I share that with the people that come to our room, and it was from someone else that gave us this idea that, if you have little children, have a code word with your child that only you and them know.
Correct.
And tell your child they are not to give it to anybody, because perpetrators will hear this show. We know they listen, and they may be asking children for code words. You tell your child only you and them know that code word, and they're not to give it to anybody. Because people who pretend that they're being nice might ask you for it because they heard that some children might have code words. But that code word only you and them know. And that code word means you feel unsafe, for any reason, get that word to me, and I know that I will stop, drop, and go and get you. I won't ask any questions because children don't want to talk about it. They might not want to talk about it over the phone or, in a WhatsApp message. But that even could be a bullying situation.
And it's also not necessary to tell your children what you're going to do. I think I've heard often where parents will say, well, if anybody ever does this to you, I'm going to do this, this, and this. Well, that's not good either, because that actually induces fear. And in a child that's been abused, they actually many of them initially want to protect the perpetrator and protect everybody around them.
Yes.
Because they don't want to be in the spotlight. They don't want to be the center of attention.
Right. They might not even want to get somebody in trouble.
Correct. Well, that's the point, right? Is that they don't want anything related to them or for them to be the problem or the cause of trouble in anybody else.
The responsibility. We say it. I say it in the trainings. Like, children are not supposed to take care of you, moms and dads and guardians.
Absolutely.
That is not their job.
Nope.
Our job as guardians and parents is to love, protect, keep our children safe, guide them, right?
They're not responsible to feed your emotional needs.
Absolutely not. And we've got to turn that around. And I know that's difficult, especially with some parents who have had trauma, did not have, any intervention or help with that.
Yeah, they're in a chronic, many, adults of trauma and parents of trauma, they've lived a life in chronic fight or flight mode.
Yeah.
So they're very, very, hypervigilant, constantly on in a trauma response.
Yeah.
Which makes them very hypersensitive to their own children.
Yeah. And then that could be learned behavior. The child's seeing that and thinking, this is how I respond when things don't go right or things don't go wrong. I become aggressive. I become emotionally abusive or, verbally abusive or...
Well, and some of that is just releasing, their need to feel in control of something.
Right. Right. It's so true, because predators who sexually violate children take away children's power. I cannot say that enough. And so growing up, whenever something happens, like something happened to me recently, and I felt like I had no power and no voice, it caused, emotional outburst, anger and tears. Yep. And thank goodness I have people in my life that understand and are patient and support me on that, and give me time to process it, digest it, and then light that little, what do you call it? Like, flick that little light back on inside me so that I can start feeling joy again and understand, right?
Yeah, the light dims to protect yourself.
Yeah.
And, when you feel the light again, you feel the sense of freedom and safety.
Yes. Yes, absolutely. And control sometimes, right? Even if that specific situation you didn't have control, but you start to get that control back because your emotions are not in control, right? So we've talked about building our children's self-esteem as much as possible to prevent the predator to take advantage of it. We've spoken about equipping your children with body safety information. Start early, speak often, do a SCARS training. We're encouraging you, thanks to our corporate and community donors. There is no charge to you. It's 3 hours of your time. If you have not done it, please go on the SCARS website, scarsbermuda.com, and get educated in how you can save the child in your life.
Yeah, just don't assume that you know everything you need to know.
Yeah.
And how to protect your children. And part of it is really managing your own expectations of yourself as a parent.
Yeah.
To recognize that you don't have all the answers. None of us have all the answers.
No, I did not have all the answers. We have, when a participant comes into our room, we provide them with a guide that I think you helped us with, Dr. Hancock, and some others in the community, on how to talk to your child.
Yeah.
It has to be an age-appropriate, child-friendly message. And we want to constantly reinforce this message so that children feel comfortable and that they have an opportunity to grow up healthy.
Yeah, and I think I've said before too in our sessions that it's not enough to just go up to your child about this particular issue and say, if somebody ever touches you or does anything that makes you uncomfortable, you can tell me. Well, if you don't already have a really solid, safe relationship, connected relationship with your child in a bond, then, your child isn't just, especially in something like this, is not just going to come up to you just because you told them to.
No.
It's got to be something that you've developed over time where your child already comes to you for everything else.
And they know that they can trust you.
Correct, because they can gauge your response. They've had experience of what your response is to difficult situations, and if it's a safe response that makes them feel safe, then they're more likely to tell you when it's something like this, which is incredibly significant.
Yeah, yeah. And then the third thing we want to talk about after the building a child self-esteem, speaking to your child about body safety early and often, helping them find their voice, because their voice matters, is predators also take advantage of a child whose parents or guardians are not active in their life.
Oh, 100%. 100%. Parents that are, either neglectful because, they don't have the tools on how to parent, or those that are incredibly busy trying to make ends meet, etc.
Yes.
Those are the kids that they're seen and they're targeted.
Yes.
Because, there's a sense that this child feels alone. This is a child that may hang around after football practice. They may hang around after school, or, hang out in the streets or with their older siblings.
Yeah.
These are kids that become targets for anybody that's willing to show them any kind of attention,
Yeah.
interest
Yeah.
in their life.
Yeah. The parent going through divorce.
Yeah.
They're so engrossed in their own pain that sometimes, this is not judging, this is what happens when we go through painful times in our life. Sometimes we're so focused and caught up on that, and children don't want to interrupt that. They're already confused and wondering what's going on, right?
Yeah. A child looks for you. I mean, one of the things that I do say often is, don't ever underestimate a child's ability to assess body language.
Right.
Kids are very hypersensitive to their parents' body language.
Yeah.
And so you may not think that your child is picking up on your own stress or disdain for their mother or father, but they're picking up on that.
They
and
sure
they
are.
certainly are not. If they don't feel like you're accessible or available to them because, you are struggling with your own stress, they're certainly not going to come. They don't want to burden you. And if they feel like they're going to burden you, they're just not going to do it.
No, because they're children, everyone.
They
They're
care
not-
about their parents. They love their parents.
They do, and they are not mini adults. They don't think like adults. They think like little children. A child that may feel lonely or disregarded, maybe, a predator is going to know that if a predator because predators become known to the family and the people in the child's life. And so they'll know that situation, and they may very carefully choose their prey. Mm-hmm. Right?
Absolutely.
So the child is feeling lonely, feeling left out, perhaps uncared for. It's a perfect opening for a predator to take advantage and fill the void.
Yeah. So don't think for a minute that just because you're providing your child with the physical needs that's enough.
Right.
For their development.
Right.
Their emotional development is just as crucial as their physical development.
And material as well, right?
Yeah.
Thinking, well, just give them this gift and they'll just,
Yeah.
no, they'll show I love them. No, it really has to be building that trust, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And even as adults, we can ask ourselves, when we were kids, what did we, when we look back then, what did we really, really want most? And, most people aren't going to say, oh, I wanted that, that toy or that PlayStation. You say, well, I wished my parents would have been around more. I wish my parents would have spent more time with me,
Yes.
made me feel special, etc.
Yes, because the perpetrator is going to say something like this: your parents have no time for you, but I do, right? They're going to build that trust with that child, fill that child's void and that need to make them feel special, and then they're going to get the child where they want them, and then make their first sexual move, right? And then they're going to start saying things like, we're going to get in trouble if you tell. If you tell, your mom's going to kill me. That's going to make, everybody sad in the family.
Well, and the manipulation in there is that, they're inducing guilt in the child before anything happens.
Exactly. Yeah. For example, like a coach, you won't get on the team, or a teacher, I might give you a bad grade, right?
Yeah. There's
or somebody in the church, or this is what God would want for us.
Yep. So there's inducing guilt and responsibility even before the perpetrator begins to cross the line.
Absolutely. And when we start thinking about the emotions of a little child who this starts happening to this child, let's start with confusion. Right?
Absolutely.
The child is already feeling some confusion, like this doesn't feel right.
Yeah.
He's been very good, or she's been very good, but now all of a sudden they're doing this, and I don't like this. I'm not feeling this.
Yeah, it's a dichotomy of emotions. So it's, I feel safe with this person, but they're doing something that makes me feel uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And so the problem is they naturally just sit in that space, for long enough where they, the perpetrator can essentially do what they want.
Yeah. Confusion, fear, I'm going to get in trouble if I tell. Somebody's going to get sick and die in my family because they've told me. I'll be kicked out on the streets. I won't be able to go to boarding school anymore.
Is this my fault? Did I do something?
Yeah, I caused it. I liked it. Well, of course, the body will respond to sex. But the child takes all that responsibility. That little child takes responsibility on. My family's going to have to go back to their country. I mean, I've started writing them. I think I'm at 27 reasons. And some of them are repeated, but using different scenarios. But there are many reasons children don't tell, and they feel, and it is confusion, it is fear. It's also another emotion is guilt, right? When they blame the child. I've spent all this money on you. I'm paying all the bills. You caused this.
You didn't stop me.
Yeah, you didn't stop me. Why didn't you stop me? Then that child feels this misplaced
You didn't tell
guilt.
me. You didn't tell me that you didn't want this.
Yeah, I've heard that. Or another emotion for a child is anger. Right? Because of the
absolutely.
betrayal.
Yeah.
Because of the fact that they weren't protected. They may be angry even at the people who didn't harm them, but they're wondering why didn't, especially if they told and an adult didn't do anything. Right?
Yeah, especially if they try to tell their parent and the parent did not pick up on even subtle hints that they've been sexually abused.
Yeah, and I want to say at this point, everyone, like years ago, we didn't have this. We weren't having these conversations.
No.
We didn't understand this topic. There was just so much shame and silence around it. I mean, there is still silence, I can tell you, because we don't have survivors wanting to come on the show, and we understand that. But that just shows the silence around this topic. But parents were not equipped with body safety information. We just trusted.
Yeah, it was children just do as they're told.
Right. Yeah, exactly. I remember that. You guys remember this? Children are seen but not heard. I mean, are we kidding? I don't know if I've said that already on this show, but I say it a lot. But no, children are to be seen. Their voices are important. We need to pay attention to their behaviors and their words. It's so, so important. And listen, I made all these mistakes too. So I am not here judging anybody. There were so many things I could have done different that I didn't do.
Well, yeah, but and I kind of go back to what I see a lot is, parents have, very unrealistic expectations of themselves that then leads to, their emotional needs needing to be met by a child.
Yeah. And especially a parent that has not had some help with their own trauma, childhood trauma.
Yeah.
Right? It's just so hard.
There's that mindset of, I turned out okay.
Oh, yeah, I've heard
So,
that. Oh, yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah,
well,
happened to me. You'll be fine.
Yeah, yeah.
No, well, not
And
necessarily.
there's almost a little bit of bitterness in that kind of statement.
Yeah,
when
exactly.
you hear it.
Exactly. So, yeah, confusion, fear, guilt, anger, shame. Let's talk about shame. Nothing silent. I always say nothing silences more than shame. For some reason, this topic is just so shameful. It just silences. I've been freed from that because, the whole island knows I'm a survivor of sexual abuse, and they probably, whatever visions they have or whatever, I'm okay with that because I know who I am on the inside. I know that what happened to me as a little girl was not my fault. I understand some of the choices I made in my life. And a lot of children will hold on to that shame that, children that were abused, because especially when the adults in their life said things like, well, what were you wearing?
Yeah.
What did you do?
It's redirecting.
Are you kidding me?
Redirecting the responsibility.
Yeah. We have to remember these are children. And let's not forget the law.
Oh, absolutely.
I don't care if a child begs an adult to have any type of sexual activity. I don't care if a child begs an adult expose their private parts to the child. It's an adult's responsibility
To set boundaries.
to set boundaries and to protect children, because we know what happens when that doesn't happen. Depression, anxiety, anger, fear, drug addiction,
And a whole
alcoholism.
Yep, a whole host of disorders that can be chronic, PTSD, and has a domino effect into other parts of their life if it's not
Yeah.
addressed or just prevented.
Yeah. Yeah. Especially if children are called names, You whore. I've heard it. Where an adult would call a child that, or a young teen that. A liar.
You provoked me.
You provoked. Yeah, look what you've done to our family. Are you kidding me? We need to move that. That is the predator. And change that. If you are a survivor of childhood sexual abuse, your experience doesn't identify you.
Well, once a child has felt shame from it, and especially if they don't get the support, that just becomes a chronic level of affecting every other part of their life.
Yeah. Yeah.
Of feeling responsible for everything and everybody, actually.
Yeah.
So if anybody around them feels upset or is going through something, many times victims of abuse will take it upon themselves to feel responsible to fix everything.
Yeah. Make sure everybody's okay.
But deep down in their internal core, there's this very deep level of not feeling good enough, and they're very hypersensitive.
Yeah. Because they're trying to keep the peace with everybody. They're trying to make sure everybody's happy.
Everyone around them is okay.
Yeah.
They become, yeah.
Yeah. Regardless of the relationship of the perpetrator and the child and the perpetrator and the family, please stand up for children. Think about this. What if it was your worst enemy
Oh,
who
definitely.
did that? Think about that. Think it was somebody you didn't like.
Yeah, would your response be different, and why?
Yeah.
Why is it different if somebody outside of your family traumatizes your child versus if it's a family member?
Yeah.
And that's when it becomes personal for that
Yeah.
parent or that family member.
Yeah. And we most definitely want to keep that light burning in our little children, right? We want them to shine. We are not identified by our looks. We are not identified by our past childhood trauma or any scar of abuse. We are identified by our hearts. We can identify with who we are today, someone with a purpose. And if you don't feel like you have a purpose, it doesn't mean you don't. That's just a feeling, a fear, because we all have a purpose, right?
Absolutely.
We each have a unique and special calling.
Well, yeah, and until people actually start healing from the trauma, they won't feel like they have a purpose.
Right, right.
Because that was all lost through, the feeling of responsibility and shame and humiliation, guilt, the perfectionism that can come from it. I make all these mistakes, therefore I don't deserve to be happy. I don't deserve to be loved.
Yeah, the feeling undeserved. What happened to us as children, it was not our fault. We can't change what happened to us. We cannot, right?
No.
But we can heal. We can get that internal light to shine because that light is there. And, when we think about a call to action, we must stand up for children, everyone. Intervene when you see anyone crossing the line of a child. You hear somebody talking sexual talk around children, intervene that. You hear someone telling, your student or your camper they look sexy, a child that looks sexy, intervene with that. You see somebody forcing a child to hug them, intervene. You see somebody forcing someone to sit on their lap when they don't want to be tickled, intervene. You see some adult staring at a child in a shower, intervene. If you hear anybody calling a child stupid, or having a child feel uncomfortable, or telling them they're ugly, Intervene.
Anybody that's hanging around that, even for an adult, it feels off. It feels uncomfortable or unusual.
Yeah.
Don't wait for something to happen. I mean, I think unfortunately we've become a society where we're reactive instead of proactive.
Yeah.
And so people wait for other people to do something about it.
Yes. Yeah, we want to intervene. Pay attention to behaviors. Check in on a child every now and then. Check with how they're feeling.
Mm-hmm.
Right?
Oh, absolutely. Those should be regular questions.
Yeah.
And, just because a child is okay on the outside doesn't mean they are on the inside.
Yeah.
And if your child is responding differently or behaving differently, don't assume that they're just going to come to you and talk to you about it.
Yeah.
Start asking, start telling them, and it may take a few times. So if they don't talk to you after you say, well, I'm here if you need me. If you want to talk to me, you can tell me.
Yeah.
You can tell me anything. Even if it's not now.
Yeah.
I'm always here.
And I might not have the answer, but we're going to get through whatever you need to tell me together.
Yeah.
Regardless of what it is. That's our job as parents and guardians.
But staying involved in
hard.
your kid's life,
Yeah.
These have to be regular occurrences. You have to build the relationship where you build trust with your child. Just because you're the child's parent doesn't mean you automatically get trust,
Yeah.
that you've earned the trust for this child to tell you anything.
Yeah. Yeah. Lessons learned, I tell you. Wish I could do it all over again. To all the survivors out there, I'm going to say hold on to hope. Remind yourself how special you are. Recognize the light you have inside you. Understand why it dims from time to time. Be kind to yourself. Realize that our power was taken because of our young mind, our vulnerability, our innocence. It was not our fault, and we did nothing to cause it, simply because we were a child. You are a light. Be a light. Don't give up the battle. The scar from your experience of surviving childhood sexual abuse does not define you. It does not identify you. You are worthy, you are valuable, and you have a purpose in this world. Fight for your joy, your peace, and your purpose. I want to remind everybody, if you've missed any part of this show or previous shows, you can listen to the recordings on our website, scarsbermuda.com. You go to the tab Media, click on the Scars Survivor Hour radio show. You'll see the recordings there. We were unable to receive the recording for the September show, but the others are definitely there. If you're interested in being a guest on one of our monthly shows, share your experience, contact me by calling 297-2277. You can email me at debbie@scars.bm. And if you don't want to, that's totally okay. We get it. We understand. This is tough stuff, everyone. For more information or resources on the healing, visit our website, scarsbermuda.com, or go to the resource and click on Resources for Healing. We're going to play a song now. And if you're a survivor out there, don't change the channel. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you for tuning in to Scars Survivor Hour on Power 95. Join us again next month on the first Wednesday at 1:15. Remember, your story matters, and together we can make a difference.